Hello everyone, welcome to the GrowCast show. My name is Yu Hong and I'll be your host for today. And today in our studio, we have Sylvia Wandly, a veteran realtor with 20 years experience in the property market. She is also the Associate Group Director in PropNex currently. So let's get to our questions. So in the second half of 2026, is it still a good time to enter the market in Singapore?
Well, many Singaporean owners, they are right now sitting on substantial property gains over the recent years. Land prices have also been rising, and just yesterday, we heard the news that CDL and Hong Leong were actually the top bidder for the Peck Hay plot, and that was at 1865 PSF PPR. That also sets the benchmark for the Newton precinct. And also not to mention, last quarter and into this first half of the year, we witnessed a couple of projects actually enjoyed over 90% launch take-up rate. So this shows that the projects are not waiting for the buyers. Instead, the buyers, when they see good projects, they are rushing in to buy. The best time to upgrade is when you see few key factors all aligned to each other. Number 1 is when the family needs it. 2, when the affordability is good. 3 is that you are sitting on some good profits or gains from your property. Last but not least, when there's an opportunity for long-term benefit.
How does someone truly know if they can afford the upgrade and not just rely purely on the bank loan?
So the bank loan does not automatically means that the upgrade is comfortable, financially comfortable. All right, there are a couple of other things to look at, which is the monthly installment, the cash flow reserves, the renovation costs, things like that. Also for the families, they need to be comfortable. They need to be able to save. They need to have some buffer for the children. If they're having some kids who are school going, they definitely need to put a certain amount of money for, say, tuition or enrichment, and that in Singapore's context can be pretty huge, right? So avoid upgrading based on emotion or even social comparison. Like when your friends buy Ferrari, you also need to buy Ferrari. The real question is not whether can I buy this property, but more, can I live peacefully after I buy this property?
Should an upgrader sell first or buy first?
There's no one answer that fits all answer. It depends on the family's situation, their finances, their risk tolerance, as well as their family needs. But some families, they do need to have the certainty to have another property before they sell. So they may commit a property, but that means that they do need to have some financial commitment. However, some families prefer to sell first because that creates certainty and there's no additional cash burden on them. So for some families with children, the priority is to have a smooth transition. So how I help my clients, we sit down and go through the analysis as well as see whether they have the financial ability to carry 2 properties. The most important thing is not about speed, but it is about proper sequencing and financial safety.
What is the number 1 biggest financial mistakes that upgraders tend to make?
So the biggest mistake is that buyers overstretch them emotionally instead of upgrading strategically. Some buyers actually, they focus too much on the size and the prestige, and they tend to overlook important things like the monthly installments, the cash flow, the renovation, particularly for resale properties. Some upgrades improve the image, but not necessarily their lifestyle. For example, some people, they actually went into 5-bedroom or penthouse, but the common bedrooms cannot fit in queen-size bed. Overcommitting financially means that there's going to be more stress because there's more financial commitments, and that means less flexibility. The smartest upgrades will include these components: the lifestyle improvement, the affordability part, as well as improving the asset strength.
Why does CPF accrued interest matter more when you are selling your home?
Well, CPF, whatever has been used for the purchase, when you sell it, has to be refunded back to the CPF. And there are 2 main components, which is the CPF principal as well as the accrued interest. And that works out to be about 2.5% of the ordinary account. However, most buyers, they overlook this. So that's why after the sale, they suddenly realize, how come I have gotten lesser sales proceeds? So these principal and the accrued need to return back. And how does it impact? It means that for your next purchase, you may have lesser cash for down payment, lesser money for renovation, as well as lesser money for your reserves. Smart upgraders always calculate what is the true net proceeds after selling the property and before committing into the next one.
What hidden costs do upgraders often overlook the most?
Buyers usually focus on their monthly installments and their down payment. What are the other hidden costs? They forgot that they have to take care of the renovation, particularly for resale properties. You need to budget for your renovation. And usually in today's market, renovation cost is on the rise. And sometimes there's unexpected costs that you have to buffer, such as sometimes you realize that there's leakage in the house. So that was not being buffered in your plan. And the other thing is about the maintenance. If you upgrade to a bigger property, it tends to have relatively higher maintenance costs. For those people who are having some temporary housing, there's additional cost to be taken into account, maybe perhaps your rental or even your storage of your furnitures, because your temporary home cannot fit in all your furnitures. Smart upgraders don't only just look at the purchase price, they also look into the long-term sustainability of the property.
What loan rules must condo upgraders understand before making a move?
There's this TDSR, in Singapore context, is total debt service ratio, and that works out to be 55% of income. So in Singapore's context, you also need to actually do the stress test. Banks do this stress test. So regardless of the current interest rate, it could be well below 2% right now. But for the banks, they would do a stress test like about 4%. So that means that probably you may end up getting a smaller loan. For buyers who are doing serious house hunting, it's always recommended that they do the IPA, which is the in-principle approval by the bank. And that is important because at least you are very well aware about what is your future commitment is going to be like. Smart buyers, they don't just look at the maximum amount that they can get, but they look into the long-term sustainability of the property.
What happens if interest rates rise again after an upgrader upgrades?
Stress. So what's going to happen is that your monthly installments, if it's based on the floating interest rates, you're going to have a higher monthly installment. All right, some people, they do take fixed rates, but fixed rates, depending on the bank's package, it could be an average about 2 years. In today's context, you have the SSD, the seller stamp duty that you have to maintain. If you keep properties minimum 4 years, after the fixed rate package has expired, you could be going back into a different rates altogether, depending on what the current interest rates are like. So for the smart buyers, they have to understand that they should have some stress buffers. They should have some additional reserves in the event there's a change in interest rates. And when interest rates high, if they have to actually serve a higher monthly, at least there's some reserves to fall back on. So that's a strategy that we would take, and it would depend on a case-by-case basis. So the goal right now is not just about surviving the uncertain interest rates, but more about having peace of mind, regardless of what the uncertain times are.
What is ABSD and how does it affect upgraders who are buying their next property?
ABSD stands for the Additional Buyer Stamp Duty. In a Singapore context, if a Singaporean holds more than one property, they will have to pay 20% for the second property. And so that actually will affect their cash flow, their reserves. For the PR and the foreigners, they also have to pay even higher ABSD rate. So for people who are in the midst of buying and selling, the timing is very crucial. Because so if they do not want to incur that, ABSD, which could be a few $100,000, then they have to be very careful about the timing. For some families, I help them to consider options like decoupling or restructuring these strategies so that they can ride through this period should they want to have multiple properties. ABSD planning should be done legally and strategically. Otherwise, this could cost you a few $100,000.
Should an upgrader keep their existing property and buy another one or sell and upgrade?
Well, keeping two properties may be good for your wealth creation, wealth accumulation. However, having another property means that you have additional commitments. And say if one property is for rental income, landlords do face vacancy period, meaning that exit of the previous tenant and securing the next tenant. And some resale properties also face repair costs, and that could be actually quite substantial for landlords. So for keeping another property, just bear in mind that you have double commitments. Even for some experienced investors, to juggle all the additional commitments with financial can be quite a burden. The best strategy would depend on the risk tolerance, the affordability, as well as the long-term goals. For the smart upgraders, it's not about having multiple properties, but it is about having peace of mind.
Should I upgrade now or wait?
For those who want to wait, the good thing is that they'll be able to accumulate more cash savings. However, waiting does not necessarily mean that you can actually secure a good pricing in future, because the replacement cost may be rising, and also uncertainties such as the interest rates. Interest rates might fluctuate, might rise, and that implies that your loan quantum is going to be relatively lower. Sometimes family needs is such that you do need to commit when the time is right and affordability is good. Some buyers think that they can time the market, but even for experienced investors, it's very difficult to time the market. So for clients, I'll actually sit with them and understand what are their family needs, what's their finances like, and what's their risk appetite. Smart upgrading is not about predicting what the market is going to happen. It is more about your preparation and your long-term sustainability.
New launch or resale condo, which is better for upgraders?
So for new launches, there is a waiting time. It could be a few years before you actually can move in or use it for your rental income. For the resale condo, the good thing is that average completion time is about 3 months or so, and that creates certainty as in when the family can use the property either to move in or to use it for rental income. And also the payment structure is pretty fixed. So for clients, the better choice really depends on their affordability, their timeline, their family needs, as well as the long-term goals. So for families who need the place, it looks like resale option is the best option. For investors who prefer to enjoy capital appreciation, then new launches would be an option for them.
Should upgraders focus mainly on PSF price, or are there more important factors?
Lower PSF doesn't necessarily mean good value. We've also got to look into the efficiency of the layout, the space, and the usable space. For example, the roof terraces in penthouses, there's a lot of wasted space, and those areas sometimes couldn't have the shelters based on the MCST ruling. So there are other key factors that buyers should also look into beyond PSF. They should also look into the location. The strength of the location actually will determine future demand for the property. Secondly, also the accessibility, the convenience, whether does it have MRT, and because things like MRT is very essential for tenants, for example, if it's a rental home. And the other thing is, besides the entry price, buyers should also look into the potential demand of the property in future. For clients, I would actually sit with them and understand their needs. So like for families, actually what do they need? And also their affordability. So all these things need to be actually discussed, and as well as their immediate concerns, like the kids need to be near the transport system, or the parents are actually working at which location. So that makes the family happy because it meets their needs. And so it's beyond the PSF just numbers.
Freehold or newer leasehold, which is the better choice for upgraders?
Well, for freehold, it gives you the sense of ownership and also legacy planning. However, the newer leasehold properties, they offer better designs. And sometimes it's not really so much about freehold or leasehold, but it also depends on the quality of the project, the upkeep, and also the location. So these factors are important. And in today's context, people also are concerned about exit strategy. So it's not so much about the tenure. So the exit strategy will actually determine your choice of the tenure. So these days, lifestyle also counts. So some people just don't want to go for massive, big projects, and they may want to opt for a quieter development. That means it's the boutique developments, and those you can find in District 15 and the East Coast lifestyle, you call it. So it doesn't actually really matter whether it's freehold or leasehold. So at the end of the day, your choice of the tenure decision depends on your lifestyle, your affordability, your timeline, as well as your long-term goal.
Is an older condo still worth buying today?
Older condos, they generally offer larger space compared to newer condos. For the older condos, they are more in the matured estates, so you know what is the environment, the amenities. But for the older condo, you may get a better or attractive quantum than the new condos. For the older condos, they may be sitting on valuable plot of land, so there's some possibility of en bloc. So what are the key factors if you want to go for either older or newer condo? Number one, you got to check on the upkeep of the condo, the quality of the maintenance, the sinking funds. And also, older condos tend to actually involve more renovation costs, leakages, and unexpected emergencies in the property that you need to actually maintain it. For older condos, if they're well located, the good news is that they can still outperform the newer condo.
Should I upgrade to landed property, or is a condo still the more practical choice?
Landed homes offer privacy, prestige, and space. Condos offer amenities, facilities, which some families do enjoy, especially if they have young children. However, landed properties, you've got more expenses to upkeep, such as the garden, the pool, and if you have the pest control, as well as the roofing issues, and that could actually be costly to maintain. And that's where you heard phrase like asset rich but cash poor. So landed homes offer status and ownership. However, the daily practicalities are more important sometimes for families, such as those with elderly parents, all right, because they need lift access. Some landed homes don't have lifts, or maybe the lifts are too small. At the end of the day, your choice to go landed depends. So what your family needs, what is your lifestyle, and as well as what's your affordability.
So how important are MRT access, schools, and nearby amenities when I'm choosing the next property?
So connectivity actually will determine future growth and also demand for the property. All these conveniences like having access to MRT and good schools actually will also attract your future potential buyers. So we are talking about exit strategy because like for example, for properties with convenience with MRT and amenities, it will attract the tenant pool. And so for in future, if you want to exit, you also have the potential buyers who will actually buy in for such properties that will actually continuously attract good tenants to the property. So with my clients, after assessing their needs, be it whether they want to stay or they want to buy for investment, I will actually walk through with them all these components and also ultimately what's their exit strategy so that they have less headache when they want to exit in future. So smart buyers, they don't just upgrade and buy the unit that they want, but they will also look into the overall value of the unit, the ecosystem, and the future exit strategy.
How important is exit strategy when buying your next home?
So every property will eventually attract the potential buyers. Some buyers, the mistake they made is that they focus too much on the entry price, but they forget about the future resale demand of the property. With clients, I will actually sit with them and see what their needs are, and we'll work out and see what kind of time frame they plan to hold the property, because that will determine how fast they can exit from the property, and that will create less stress rather than just focusing on the property now, emotionally attached to it. But when it comes to the exit strategy, it's very difficult to execute. So I will actually highlight all these concerns and potential issues for the clients. So smart upgraders, we're not just looking at the existing property that we are upgrading, but we'll also take into consideration what is the future marketability of this property.
What are the top mistakes buyers regret after they upgrade?
They overstretch financially. They overlook costs like renovation. For resale properties, for instance, they've actually got to buffer in some reserves in case the renovation goes over the budget. The other thing is about the monthly installment. Sometimes when you are upgrading, you get a bit emotionally caught up with the excitement and all that. So you don't do your calculation properly. The other factor is also as you are rushing in to buy emotionally, you forgot about important things like the layout, the efficiency, space, things like that. The other key mistake buyers usually make is about the wrong location. For instance, if the family, like the parents or the children, they have to travel to their school or workplace and the traveling time eats up a lot of their time on a daily basis, that means that you're going to have less rest, less sleep, and where's the quality of lifestyle? So buyers tend to overlook that. So with clients, I actually need to sit with them and understand what are the family's priorities, what their needs are, what are their affordability, and so that at the end of the day, it's a quality upgrade.
What does a good property advisor help upgraders see that they may not notice on their own?
I feel that there are 5 areas that you should look out for. The first thing is the financial ability. It's beyond the purchase price. You got to look into the installments, the cash flow, the reserves, as well as the long-term potential for the property. The second aspect is about the difference between a nice purchase and a smart upgrade. So that's where I would actually highlight to them about the layout and the exit strategy. Because today you buy the property and tomorrow if you're stuck or you need to exit for some emergency, for some reasons, all right, you got to make sure that you have an exit plan for this property. Sometimes when we are buying, a lot of emotional get caught up in the process. So that's where objectively I will highlight what are the risks that buyers may miss. Perhaps it's the ABSD exposure and as well as some hidden things that you may not be aware of. The other aspects are the risks that the buyers should be wary of. For example, the potential ABSD exposure, and also maybe there's some weaker demand for this property. Also, let's look at the family's needs. What are the long-term goals and what are the needs that they have? Perhaps the children need more space, or the elderly people that are staying in the family, they do need some community or amenities around the neighborhood. The last but most important component is the strategic positioning for the future. A good advisor will not ask you what property to buy. Instead, a good advisor will ask you, what will this property be in your life for the next 5 to 10 years in future?
That's all the questions we have. Stay tuned for the next episode.